What you once thought was true never really was. Everything you know of me is not more than fuzz. There's one last secret spell that I'll try to explain, and please do your best to deny it in vain.
The NHL's New York Rangers have been through the mud, dirt, and icy water of it all. We spoke of professional hockey's original six teams, one of which being the Blue Shirts from Broadway. When they joined the NHL, they became the first team ever from the United States and the fastest expansion team to win a Stanley Cup title. They won another 5 years later, then another 7 years after that in 1940. The team's short existence had seen nothing but success and really cool cigarette ads with their players. They missed the playoffs in just one of their first 14 seasons. But trouble was looming in the large house of plants. Madison Square Garden, or the MSG that stood in New York at this point, was the Hockey Rangers' home all along. In that very first season, they'd entered into a mortgage that allowed them to play there. By the 1940 Cup-winning go-around, that mortgage was completely paid off, and like a 72-year-old middle-class employee, their home was finally, actually, their home. The pleasant fortune of New York being in possession of the Stanley Cup at this monumental time in the franchise just couldn't be ignored by management. This is a PR opportunity. On the ice in MSG, the Rangers publicly burnt the mortgage of the building inside of the Stanley Cup trophy. What happened next, without video, is the subject of many conflicting stories. Either A, the fire went out without much incident and the mortgage papers were burned and everyone went on their own way. Option B, the more often scenario thrown around, is that the fire quickly burnt larger than expected, engulfing much of the entire Stanley Cup in flames. Members of the 1940 Rangers hockey team rushed onto the ice and, in unison, began frantically peeing all over the cup to put out the fire. It was a successful hose job. Whichever of these stories is true, we can't be sure, but we know the conclusion regardless. If you're not a hockey fan, it's vital to understand that this trophy, the greatest trophy in sports by so far it's funny, is a holy object. In the sport, the Stanley Cup is taken by each team and each player who wins it. They all get to spend time with it, they all get their names engraved on it. The now almost 3 feet tall hump of silver has seen some things through its lifespan. It's tough to explain just how much the cup has been through and what it means to the sport of hockey. Funny enough, and this is the exact type of sentence I pictured myself writing when I got into this career, debate exists not on whether or not the Rangers peed in the cup, but when the peeing took place. Some allege that two brothers on the team, Lynn and Muzz Patrick, excitedly turned the cup onto toilet mode as they were celebrating right after the team won in 1940. What's fascinating is that 15 years earlier, those same two brothers were running around their childhood home, playing with various toys in the basement. They stumbled upon the very real Stanley Cup, which their father, an NHL manager and coach, was keeping at home. It was 1925, hockey wasn't super popular, and the thing would be more recognizable to an average person as scrap metal than a trophy. The boys, about 13 years old, used a nail they found on the ground and engraved their own names into the sacred cup. A decade and a half later, they had each of their names officially dug in, and their urine probably sit in it at some point or another as members of the 1940 Rangers. There may not be two men with a closer relationship to that piece of metal. Now, when the New York Rangers lit hockey's soul on fire and possibly further insulted as a porta potty, the gods of the game, the lords of the ice, Elsa from Frozen, were angered. For disrespecting Lord Stanley and his precious cup, the team would endure a curse, unlike any ever seen in hockey. One ulterior explanation to the curse involves the folding of the New York Americans, who shared Madison Square Garden's ice with the Rangers. The Americans temporarily suspended operations because of the war in the early 40s. This took the league from 7 total teams, which they had been playing with from a few years now, to 6, marking the exact start of the original 6 era. Their manager, Red Dutton, was named the president of the NHL during wartime, and he stepped down when the war ended only because he wanted to bring his New York Americans back on the ice. Unfortunately, not due to a lack of effort from him, the team was never able to get back playing, and temporary turned to permanent with the Americans folding. The rest of the NHL, even though they had promised to help him get the Americans back, had no intention of following through on that promise. Before he resigned, Dutton allegedly told everyone at one last owners' meeting to stick their hockey teams where the sun does not shine. And I don't think he was trying to protect their ice rinks from melting when he said that. Angered, with much of it focused on his New York counterpart, Dutton would place a curse on MSG's other pro hockey team, promising that the 1940 Cup would be the last in Ranger history. This is why you'll see some people refer to this as the Dutton Curse. Funny enough, the Rangers also asked to temporarily suspend operations during World War II due to their franchise being heavily weakened. The NHL just simply denied this request, and they had to keep playing with borderline scabs and barely any fans. The 1944 team can be remembered for this the worst. With a season record of 6 wins, 39 losses, and 5 ties, I'd say the player most worth mentioning was the goaltender. It doesn't feel fair to make fun of Ken McCauley because he's kind of what would happen if the Rangers called me and offered me the starting goalie spot for the season. I'd say hell yeah, and then go be the worst athlete in the history of team sports. He was on the team due to a lack of goalkeeper talent. He stayed on the team due to a lack of goalkeeper pulses. Ken allowed an average of 6.2 goals a game, a record that still stands today as the worst mark ever reached by anyone to play 25 games in a season. Hilariously, Ken played all 60 minutes of all 50 games this year, except for one. Mid-season, December 23rd, they lose to Detroit, which dropped them to 2-16 on the season. New York made their only change of the year. Ken played the first 40 minutes of the game. He allowed a slightly statistically high 5 goals through 2 periods. Then he got hurt. He was subbed out in favor of a 17-year-old boy who was loaned to the Rangers for just a single game. The 17-year-old pitched a 20-minute long, 1-period shutout. He set a record that still stands for the youngest goalkeeper to ever play in the NHL. After his 1-game tenure with New York, he would never suit up for the Rangers again, being that he was loaned there. It's even more mind-boggling when you learn who the kid was. His name, Harry Lumley. The next season, he turned 18, and he joined the Detroit Red Wings as their full-time goalie. 15 years after that, he'd finally hang up his skates and be inducted into the NHL Hall of Fame as one of the best goalkeepers in history. Of the 5 teams he played with, none were as brief or as hilarious as his 1-game Ranger stint. But New York went back to Ken McCauley, who came back from his injury the very next day and stayed with them the rest of the season. He would let up 26 goals in their next 4 games. Funny enough, it was 1 month to the day after that Lumley game that Ken would do something to make his name remembered forever. January 23rd, 15 goals in 1 game, putting himself on the wrong side of the biggest blowout in NHL history. The league has never seen an uglier game, even today. That was a rough season for the Rangers, and still so close removed from a championship. It could have been taken as a warning sign. After a decade ringless, the Rangers were able to get into the Stanley Cup Finals, but they lost under comedic circumstances. Stories like this are exactly why I'm drawn to the unique aura of silliness in early pro sports. Madison Square Garden had realized they could make a lot more money renting the building out to the Ringling Brothers Circus than the Rangers hockey team, or even the Knicks basketball team. It was impossible to use the arena for hockey and a circus on the same day, so the team would sometimes get booted out of their own arena and be forced to play in neutral or even just away stadiums in a home game. It even happened in the playoffs, and this was the case for their loss in the 1950 Cup Finals. The series was close, New York had the better record, but all of their home games had to be played in Toronto at a neutral site. With a 3-2 series lead, they lost back-to-back games, both in a neutral stadium. They went out in 7 on a double overtime heartbreaking goal, and it is easy to imagine that in a game that close, the slightest of advantage, like a home crowd cheering you on, might have been enough to put you over the edge. The Rangers sucked their way right out of the original 6 era, and when they couldn't win a championship with only a half dozen teams in the league, doubling that number certainly did not help their odds. They impressively made the playoffs 9 years in a row to start the new era, but never went all the way. 2 years off, then they went on another 10-year playoff stretch with no cup to drink from for it. They were embarrassing enough on their own. If New York was a small town with no teams, we could still make fun of the Rangers. But the old thief of joy loves to step in to make you feel even worse about yourself. Comparison to their neighbor franchises across all sports proves shameful. In their 54-year desolation period, the New York Yankees won a comical 14 World Series titles. The New York Mets won 2 World Series titles. The New York Giants baseball team, who, as we know, moved to San Francisco in 1958, had also gotten one in there. Oh, and so had the Brooklyn Dodgers, who moved west in the same year but won a World Series in 55. That is 4 different teams in the same market, in the same sport, a sport that had many more teams in its league than pro hockey, and they all won championships during the Rangers' drought. The New York Knicks won 2 NBA titles, and when you're getting nicked out of a sports stat, you know it's bad. The ABA's New York Nets had also won 2 championships regarding pro basketball. Football was mournful too. The New York Giants stretched off an NFL championship and later 2 Super Bowl trophies in the time. And dear Lord, the New York Jets won a Super Bowl. I take back what I said about the Knicks. This is rock bottom. In addition to these sports, even New York hockey grew past the Rangers. In the 54-year gap, all 5 of the other original 6 NHL teams won championships. The Canadiens won 20 of them. 5 other expansion teams that had joined after the Rangers' last Stanley Cup win also took home championships in the time. None of these were more pitiful than the crosstown New York Islanders, who were created as a hockey team 32 years after the Rangers were last champions and won 4 consecutive Stanley Cups before the Rangers could break their own streak. A lot of these decades of nothingness can be explained by the loose nepotism-fueled corruption that dominated pro hockey for a long while. The convoluted factors of the original 6 teams mirrored themselves in ownership. James Norris, who owned the Detroit Red Wings, also owned controlling stakes in the Chicago Blackhawks and New York Rangers franchises. This meant he actively could decide the direction of half the teams in the league, and he played a big role in the Boston Bruins franchise too, after he gave them some loans to save them. He used this advantage to stack all of the best players onto his Red Wings. One man, and his perpetual fear of losing to inferior talent, really almost did put the NHL into defunct sports land, and it's kind of a miracle that he didn't. The territorial draft that the NHL used at the time also put New York at a pretty big disadvantage. Getting the first rights to players within 50 miles of your home stadium was not nearly as big for them as it was for Toronto, Montreal, and even Detroit. In '94, the Rangers had a good team with the potential to end the curse. They swept the Islanders in the playoffs, won another round, and in the semifinals met up with the only team God may have hated equally. Aptly, the Devils. New Jersey's hockey team had never won a Stanley Cup in their 20 years of being. The team's fans, as they were taught by Islander fans, spent the series chanting 1940 in the stands, a reminder to the Rangers of how long it's been. Supernatural forces played a factor. New Jersey's home arena held an eerie maximum total of exactly 19,040 fans. It went 7 games, trouncing through double overtime, PTSD in your head, next goal to the Stanley Cup Finals, and behind the coveted New York athlete overconfident promise, the Rangers won and advanced. The Stanley Cup also went to 7 games and was also won by the Rangers, officially ending the curse. I don't feel right describing this game. It's available in full on YouTube, and I'm going to link it in the description. Just go watch the last 2 minutes of it. The energy, the feeling that it exudes while playing in the corner of your screen as a YouTube video is unlike anything I have ever seen in Madison Square Garden or almost any other arena. You'll be hard-pressed to find a video of fans anywhere that can bleed their emotions through a 30-year, bad quality telecast so clearly. I don't like either team. I knew how it ended, and I got nervous watching. Play-by-play announcer Sam Rosen famously called the ending. I'll let his words speak for themselves.
And this one will last a lifetime! No more curses!
Man, for a fan base like this, that is legendary. So long coming. They deserve it, no doubt. Hold on. He said what? This one's gonna last a lifetime. Those are the words he wanted echoing through the walls of the garden. That's what he went with, a lifetime. No more curses? Sam, what are you doing here? As it turns out, Sam Rosen may have doomed another few generations of Rangers fans. You see, the sporting gods are kind of like a calculator. They take everything very literally. Sam could have pulled a Jason Tatum and yelled, "We did it, yay." But he had to get poetic. He had to try and be meaningful. The New York Rangers have yet to win another Stanley Cup since 1994. 31 years and counting. That one is lasting a lifetime for Rangers fans, whether they like it or not. This is all they get. One championship in the last 85 years. The 94 Cup finals are pretty funny because while breaking and then instantly restarting the Rangers curse, they actually started another very well-known one in the hockey world. The Rangers beat the Canucks out of Vancouver. The year before that, in 93, the Montreal Canadiens had won the Stanley Cup. Somewhat amazingly, in the last 31 years since that Montreal team, not a single NHL team from Canada has won the Stanley Cup. Now, the odds aren't on their side. Only 7 out of the league's 32 teams play north of the border, but for a place that's supposed to be ice hockey's true home, it's a rough streak. And it includes the once overly dominant Montreal Canadiens, 20 championships through the Rangers' drought, reduced to ringless ash the past 3 decades. Now, at least they know, even just a little bit, what Rangers fans have gone through. We'll see how many lifetimes we have to wait for these to break. This is the curse of 1940.